in module 2 and module 3, we have mostly discussed the control loop of feedback system, feedback control system. So you see in the feedback control system, when we have derived that open loop transfer function, we have got two blocks. One is a process block, another is the disturbance block, right? And that process and disturbance block, they are finally coupled through the feedback logic, right? So you see that if this is my open loop system, here we have the process block GP and is combined with the disturbance block GD, where we have a single disturbance hitting that system. So this we know as open loop, right? So that is open loop process. Now, thing is that here we will couple the feedback loop. First, we will initiate the loop through measuring device GM. We fed the measuring device to the comparator, which is the integral part of the controller, and we compare it with the set point. Right? Error is being generated, fed to that feedback controller, and controller's output is C prime S, and the controller's decision is implemented on the process through the terminal control loop element, which is the final control element. So you see, if you again view this process, so we have one output or control objective, so definitely one measurement, right? And here we have one manipulated variable. So everything is consistent in number. That means for one control objective, we have one measurement, and definitely there will be one manipulated variable, right? So, however, the process model may not be as simple as this single block element. We can think of process where we have two process blocks being coupled with intermediate disturbances. Like, we can think of situations where we will have this GP1, next an intermediate disturbance. Maybe there is a disturbance block, I am not going for it because otherwise it is very simply it can be accommodated if I have a block here. Then another process block with another disturbance being added to it, finally giving the output, right? Or many other complicated blocks where we have this interlinked process, and that depends on what sort of state model we are getting, right? What is the state model of that system? Based on that, the transfer function of this open loop will be decided. So here we are going to discuss that advanced control strategies where the performance of the feedback loop will be sluggish or inferior. So in order to improve this basic control strategy, we have to think of different other modes of control which may be using the elementary feedback loop, but at the same time some of them will be using this elementary feedback loop, but at the same time it's not typically following the same structure of this feedback control. Particularly in cases where we have, say, we can think of situations like more than 1 measurements and 1 manipulated variable, or alternatively more than 1 manipulated variable however only 1 measurement. Right. So under these situations, definitely we have to go for, or we have to use multiple feedback loops or multiple loops rather. Okay. So you have to use multiple loops. So primarily we will discuss in advance within this fourth module, last part of the fourth module, which is advanced control strategies, and that include this cascade control, selective control, and split range control or feed forward control. There are 4 topics. Okay. So the category what we are discussing now, this will include the cascade control, next the selective control, and the split range control. They all fall within these 2 fundamental categories, right? So we have more than 1 measurement and 1 manipulated variable, more than 1 manipulated variable and 1 measurement. So within these 2 broad types, we can finally categorize these 3 different types of advanced control strategies, which we will discuss in detail. That is cascade, then selective, and finally split range. Okay. So first we will start with discussing this. This giving rise to 3 standard control scheme. The cascade, next selective, next split range. Right. So the point is, here we are going to discuss first the cascade control strategy, where we are using more than 1 measurement and 1 manipulated variable. So first we will try to understand the concept of 2 processes being linked together. One may be the primary process, another may be the secondary process. Definitely there must be certain hierarchy as we have this type of information flow, right? So we will primarily discuss this cascade control. And cascade control is a control strategy being used where we have to go for more than 1 measurements and only 1 manipulated variable. So we'll start our discussion with cascade control. So as I mentioned, more than 1 measurement and only 1 manipulated variable. So where we need this? So you see, let's think of a tank reactor which may be idealized as a CSTR, where some exothermic reaction is being conducted and we have the reactor fitted with coolant jacket. and the flow of coolant is like this. Here we have the coolant in and its temperature will be Tc, right? Though definitely, as you know, that Tc in and Tc out. So here we have coolant out. So it is Tc out and this is Tc in, right? So Tc will be in the order of, rather here let's write, Tc will be in the order of Tc in plus Tc out by 2. Why we are allowed to do this approximation, do this averaging? As Tc out is close to Tc in, right? Because or based on the narrow range of cooling tower. See, the range of cooling tower means the inlet and difference of this inlet and outlet temperature. And generally, for standard operations, the range of the cooling tower is always close to 10 degree, right? It never exceeds 10 degree. Why? Because a huge amount of water is to be cooled, right, and recirculated back again to the heat load, maybe with certain amount of blowdown and this makeup water addition. Okay. So if we basically go beyond a certain temperature, like if my inlet temperature is around 25 degree for cooling water, and if we go beyond this outlet temperature of maybe 35 degree, what may happen? There will be local these regions where the temperature may exceed this 52 degree, though the bulk temperature is still below 35-37 degree. Now at 52 degree or at 52 degree, what may happen? The soluble bicarbonates will precipitate as insoluble carbonates, and different other chemical reactions may also take place in this neighborhood of temperature around 47 to 55 degree, right, which is the local temperature. And as a consequence, you have the depositions of these insoluble precipitates on this heat transfer surface, leading to excessively high dirt resistance. So we will try. There are two reasons that why we don't go beyond this 10 degree difference between Tc in and Tc out. The first reason is the range of cooling tower, and second is this precipitation problem and associated dirt resistance problem. So that's why the coolant temperature may be approximated as Tc in plus T, the arithmetic average of the inlet and outlet temperature. Now we are giving, here we have the starter. This is the level, and here this is the feed. Okay, whose temperature is Ti, and we are taking the product here. Now if a reaction, say elementary reaction A giving B is taking place and delta H is highly negative, which means it is exothermic reaction. Right? And we have to go for its temperature control, because at some specific temperature the yield of the desired product, here maybe there's parallel other branch outs where the desired product is B, so yield of this B is maximum, right? So what we will go for apparently, simply we will attach a feedback loop upon measuring the temperature here and using a PID controller, because PID we know is the standard selection for temperature and composition control. So you see that here we will attach a temperature transmitter, it may not be an indicator, right? Because local indication is not at all necessary in a chemical plant. If it is displayed at this control room, then it's all the okay. So it may not be displaying here locally, it's simply generating that electronic signal and it transfers this temperature signal. So we go to temperature control, right? And here we have this control valve in the coolant line. So this is the control loop we have, typical feedback control. Right? Now you see this feedback control loop is highly sensitive to inlet temperature of the feed. So this is sensitive to any temperature change in the feed, that is change in Ti, right? Because the change in the temperature Ti will be immediately felt in the system, recognized by this temperature transmitter, and automatically this control action will be taken, and here definitely I have missed that you are giving the set point. However, it is relatively insensitive to any change in the coolant temperature. Particularly if I change the Tc in, definitely the Tc is going to change, and whenever Tc changes, see, there will be delayed response by this feedback controller. Why it is delayed? Because if Tc changes, then the heat transfer rate, that is the cooling rate, will drop, but the heat generation rate will remain the same. Right. So if the heat generation rate is high and the heat dissipation rate is low, the temperature of the system will start increasing, and at that point it will be felt by this feedback control loop, and this valve will be opening up, the coolant line valve will open up, and it will be delivering more coolant. So what we can say, that it is highly sensitive, this feedback control system is highly sensitive to any change in Ti because the effect is immediately felt, but however, relatively insensitive to the change of Tc, that is the coolant temperature. Right. So if I have to go for an efficient control system which will have no sluggishness, it will have a kind of prompt response, then you must understand that we should simultaneously measure Tc. Right? We are measuring T, and at the same time we should measure Tc, because effect of Ti is immediately felt by this measurement, but we don't have any hint about the effect of Tc. When Tc actually changes, then the system temperature when starts changing, then the effect will be felt, and then we will go on increasing this coolant flow. Right? But over that time interval, the temperature will be above and over that the desired level or the set point, right? And as a consequence, we can have appreciable yield of these undesired products, right? And that is to be corrected. We want to correct it. So we have to think differently. My control philosophy is to be changed. So we will go for measurements of both T and Tc. And that Tc, here we will be using two controllers. Like if I am measuring T feeding to this controller, right? This controller will generate that what should be the coolant flow rate, right? It will generate a signal, and which will be serving as a set point for the second controller. A second controller whose measured variable will be Tc, and it's taking this input as its set point, right? What is the set point here? The set point will be what should be the actual value of Tc, right? What should be the actual value of Tc in order to rectify that. And this current value of Tc will be compared with this actual value, that is the set point being delivered by this controller, will be compared with it, and then finally we will generate the corrective measure. Okay, so that is called the cascade control. So here what will be the respective strategy and the PNL. So the same controller, the same unit, coolant jacket, right? Coolant flow line, outflow, so here we have the starter, this is the liquid level, the product, here we are taking it out, here we have the feed whose temperature is Ti, and now we will have the control strategy. What is that? Here you see, first we will go for the measurement of the system temperature through temperature transmitter 1, right? Next it's going to the controller TC1, generating the set point for the secondary controller, right? And secondary controller, that is TC2, which also receives the input of coolant temperature through TT2. So we are measuring the coolant temperature here. And finally it's going to control the valve or the coolant flow rate. So here we can understand that there is an inside loop, right? And that's called the secondary loop. And there is an outer loop which is the primary loop, right? So this is the primary controller. This will be the secondary controller. The understanding research that here we are measuring the variable, primarily we are measuring the variable that we want to control, which is the system temperature, right? And here we are deciding that in the primary controller we are deciding that what should be the coolant temperature only. What should be the coolant temperature, right? In order to keep this system temperature at its set point. So what should be the coolant temperature means it is giving you a set point regarding the coolant temperature, right? And what is the actual temperature which is being measured by TC2, and this secondary controller is taking finally the judgment regarding the coolant flow rate. So this inner loop is getting activated from the instruction of the outer loop. So alternatively the secondary loop, you see, the secondary loop is also called the inner loop or alternatively the slave loop, because there is an harder. And the primary loop is called outer loop or master loop. Okay? So the master loop is instructing the slave loop to function because it is supplying the set. And that's the basic idea behind cascade control. Okay? So what we have to understand at the level of the process, that actually there are two processes. Here we have two processes. One is the heat generation, the process in the reactor itself. Another is the heat withdrawal rate by coolant circulation. So there are two processes which are being coupled, right? Which are being coupled. First we have a secondary process, then a primary process, and then finally the output. Now secondary process here, will be the heat withdrawal rate by the coolant, which there may be disturbances like coolant, this temperature may change, right? Coolant temperature may change, there may be some other disturbances as well. And next is that this heat withdrawal rate is affecting the process temperature, right? So that reaction and the respective thermal aspect is the primary process, whereas the coolant circulation and the respective heat withdrawal is the secondary process, and these two are being coupled. So in order to have a fast response of the controller, we will not go by the typical feedback, we will have to go for two measurements. One is the final measurement of the final control objective or the state variable, another will be the intermediate measurement, which is the output of the secondary process. Okay. So this is the idea of what is referred as cascade control loop. So now we will try to formalize its block diagram, and therefrom we will have the different ideas and different types of these revealing aspects that regarding how to design a cascade control loop for a process which we can actually split into two different process blocks. So you see, where the open loop process where we can apply actually this cascade control is this GP2, then disturbance D2, GP1, we have the disturbance D1, producing the output, right. So that's the open loop, and this is the manipulated value. Single manipulated value, right. So typical feedback loop, what will be that? GP2, next disturbance block, D2, GP1, disturbance D1 prime, Y prime bar S. Now what will be the feedback loop? Here we attach the measuring device GM, and here we go for the comparator Y prime SP bar. So where we have this input minus, and next the controller block GC and the final control element block GF, right? And what change we are going to make in the cascade control? So let's see. So the cascade control loop will be like this. So let's draw first this process. This GP2, right, disturbance, GP1, producing the output, right. Now before it heats the primary process, here from we will go for a measurement. GM2. going to the comparator here, which will be supplied with a set point, and that will be basically the output of the primary controller. So we'll go to this later. So here it's minus, this is plus. Next it's going to this GC2, the secondary controller, and the final control element GF. So that's basically the secondary loop, right? And here we go for primary loop. And here we will attach the primary controller. So you see, in overall, this is the secondary loop. And this is the primary loop. Right? And here we are taking some basic corrective action, intermediate corrective action, but it may not be foolproof. We don't want a foolproof zero offset corrective action to be implemented in the secondary loop. It's a partial correction we are making, and we are going for the primary process. And the overall exhaustive correction will be made by primary controller. So the primary controller generates a set point based on which the secondary controller functions, right? So you see that if we go for a bit of block diagram analysis for the cascade control, so you can understand that for the secondary loop, the open loop transfer function GOL2 is equal to GC2 GF GP2 into GM2, right? So the characteristic equation from where we will conclude about the stability of this secondary loop, equation of secondary loop is 1 plus GOL2 is equal to 0. Now, open loop transfer function for the primary loop will be GC1 into this entire block can be replaced by GOL2 divided by 1 plus GOL2, that we know, right? So multiplied by GP1 into GM1. Okay? So next, and actually this is typically the simplification what we can go for here in block diagram, and characteristic equation of primary loop will be 1 plus GOL1 equal to 0. Right. So you see there are some salient features of this cascade control loop which now I would like to summarize. The first one, what will be the choice of controller? Right. What will be the choice of controller? So here we'll go for some characteristic features and general remarks on cascade control loop and associated controller design. What are they? First, as you see, what I have mentioned, that we don't have to go for full-fledged correction of the response of the secondary process. So, even if we are trying to control temperature or composition where PIDs are required, we have to or we should use for faster response a P controller, right, as a secondary controller. So, P controller or PI controller, generally the PI is very sluggish, PI controller, but with small tau I. That means tau I is what? The time interval over which the primary control action of a PI controller, that is due to the proportional mode, is being repeated, right? So it repeats, that's why it is called the repeat time or reset time. Okay? The tau I has got a physical significance which has been probably covered in this module, these two. Like the tau I, the significance of tau I is something like that it's actually the time interval over which the initial proportional action is being repeated. Okay? So P or PI controller, so that's why if I reduce this tau I, right, we are making the controller actions much more faster than a conventional PI controller with standard tau I value. So even the most or the optimal, this recommended controller for the secondary one is P controller, where once you have the error, immediately the output will be generated. There is no delay or sluggishness because proportional controllers are pure gain element. Okay? So P controller and PI controller with small tau I is recommended as secondary controller. Right? Primary controller may be a PI or a PID. Right? So that's the first issue. Now the dynamics of the this secondary loop, see, the dynamics of the secondary loop is much faster than the primary loop. Okay? The dynamics of the secondary loop is much faster than the primary loop, and essentially what we have, that whenever it is much faster than the primary loop, we need much more higher value of crossover frequency, what we have discussed in the previous session. That crossover frequency in this so crossover frequency basically in the secondary loop will be much higher than that of primary loop, right? So you see that secondary loop is much faster than primary loop. And without going into crossover frequency, because of that, we can say that so we may go for higher Kc in secondary control. Right. So you may go for higher Kc in the secondary loop is permitted actually without endangering the loop stability or the system stability. Right. It's much faster and generally it will have much higher crossover frequency, and because it has got a much higher crossover frequency, its amplitude ratio at crossover frequency will be always less than 1, because generally what happens for standard these phase lag processes, the amplitude ratio decays down, right? Amplitude ratio decays down with the frequency. See, if we go for the just understanding the Bode plot, this will be the trend of amplitude ratio with frequency. And phi omega, if I have something like that, where this is minus 180, here we have crossover frequency. So definitely the gain will be much lower. So we, as the gain is much lower than 1, we can go for a higher value of this controller constant, controller proportionality constant, even without going close to AR equal to 1. So you know that at crossover frequency, if I have amplitude ratio greater than 1, then the system is unstable according to Bode stability criteria. So what I am trying to say here, that generally it is found that the crossover frequency for the secondary loop is much higher than that of primary loop. What does it mean? That it means that considering the general trend of the lag system, at this crossover frequency, as it is higher, the respective amplitude ratio will be much lower than 1, right? So even if you allow or if you go for a higher value of this Kc, still you are not endangering the stability of this entire loop. So this is the idea of this statement, that you can go for higher Kc as the secondary loop response is much faster and it has got a higher value of crossover frequency, right? Secondary loop is much faster than the primary loop. Here we can write that omega CO2 is much higher than omega CO1, right? So you may go for higher Kc in the secondary controller without endangering the system stability. And the third one, regarding the tuning criteria. You see, generally there are two standard tuning criteria we have we are discussed with, like probably in the module 3 you have got idea of closed loop or this open loop Cohen-Coon tuning technique, whereas here in the previous lecture I have discussed about the closed loop Ziegler-Nichols tuning technique, right? So basically you see the Ziegler-Nichols is more rigorous, more foolproof than Cohen-Coon and more reliable. So, and there are also empirical tuning criteria like gain margin we have discussed as 1.6, gain margin equal to 1.7 or phase margin is equal to 30 degree. So these are also standard these notions of empirical tuning criteria. And additionally we have this 1/4 decay ratio and many others. So here we will go for any standard tuning for the secondary control. It may be Cohen-Coon, generally this rigorous and tedious calculation based Ziegler-Nichols is not recommended for tuning the secondary controller. It may be Cohen-Coon, it may be 1/4 decay ratio, it may be any integral criteria like you have seen that minimizing this integral of square error, of integral of time weighted absolute error or integral of absolute error, that is also serving other tuning criteria, right? Probably it has been discussed in module 3. So we may use any tuning criterion like Cohen-Coon 1/4 decay ratio, minimum IAC, ITAE or IAE, etc. anything for secondary control. For secondary controller, we can use any tuning criteria. However, rigorous Zeren tuning or Zeren criteria or Zeren technique rather is recommended for primary control. Right. So we have, see, that's about the cascade control theory in general. Now, and the strategy itself. Now you see, these type of processes are everywhere present in chemical process plant. I have given a single example of this exothermic reactor. We can think of another example like the reboiler steam supply control at the bottom of this distillation column. You see that we have got the idea of total reboiler or thermosiphonic reboiler, what we frequently use for distillation column. Like here, you see at the bottom of this distillation column what we have. This is a down cover, right? And okay, let's go for a different way. Actually, here we have a baffle, right? This fills up, giving the required head necessary for thermosiphonic recirculation to continue. Right? So, and whatever is the overflow here will take out as water product. Right? Which is actually via level control. Now the outcome of this thermosiphonic reboiler, you see that if this is the downcomer, so it will be something like this. Here we are delivering it, right? Here we deliver it, somewhere here. So this is a thermosiphonic reboiler, and we have the supply of steam in the shell side of this reboiler. And where from we are taking the steam? From a common steam header. Common steam supply line, right, and which is also supplying to many other devices. So you see that what will be the control loop? The control loop, the primary control, what is our objective? That you measure the temperature here. If the temperature drops below the certain level, that means that you have to deliver more steam here, right? So you measure the temperature, Tt, then there will be a temperature controller, right, which will decide about the flow, right. So this will supply that what should be the desired flow in this line. Now we have a secondary controller, that is the flow controller. So here we have this flow transmitter, right? Why this is necessary? Why not the temperature controller directly instructing this control one? Because this temperature controller, if you go for direct feedback control, eliminating this and this controller, what will happen? In the common steam line, the steam requirement in different other units actually changes. So the pressure in this steam line, right, may be suddenly drop at this point of connection, and where for the same valve opening we can have the different amount of flow. So temperature controller will decide about what is the flow rate of steam required. So based on that it will instruct this flow controller. So this flow controller will actually consider the flow, this actually measure the flow, and based on this deviation it will open or close this control valve. So what we can note here, let's see, this flow control is the secondary loop, and this one, the outer one, is the primary. Right? That's a typical example of this control of steam flow rate in this distillation columns reboiler unit. Right? So that's all about the cascade control. So let's go for this understanding of different control system where we have one manipulated variable. See, we have one manipulated variable and more than one control objective. We have one manipulated variable and more than one control objective. So what we have to do there? If I have more than one control objective, I have to switch the manipulated variable, right, from one control objective to another control objective. So there may be different types of, or at least 2 or 3 feedback loops, and the switching of the control action from one or the standard loop to some other loop which may be used for safety purpose, right, which maybe we have to use it for safety purpose, that switching definitely is necessary, and there will be another element which is called the selector switch. It may be a high selector switch, it may be a low selector switch, which will actually switch the control action from one loop to another loop in this typical this selective control, right? So this type of control strategy, in this it's a subclass of the selective control, it's called override control. So selective control, when we are going to use this selective control? So we have here one manipulated variable and multiple control objectives. So second topic is this typical, what is the exact name? Let me check. Selective control. Selective control. So that is typically there are many other classes as well, but we will mostly discuss the major 2 classes. One is override control strategy, and second one is this auctioneering control strategy. Right. Here in this override, we have 2 different loops. We will have 2 different loops, right? Generally, a specific loop will function and will operate the device. But during startup and shutdown, and during even normal operation, if certain unusual happens, specifically keeping in mind the safety considerations, then the normal loop's control action should be stopped and it should be switched to some safety purpose loop or startup and shutdown loop, right? So here switching of control action from one loop to another is practiced, right? And typically this type of strategy is typically required for startup, shutdown, and for safety purpose. Next, auctioneering control, where we use it, we have multiple measurements, right? However, control action, or rather manipulated variable, is changed based on the maximum value, maximum or maybe minimum. It's a kind of this, within this measured variables we have to go for a kind of optimization, that which one is giving you the maximum value. Definitely again it's for some safety limits, right? So maximum value, or maybe alternatively the minimum value. So we have multiple measurements, however manipulated variable is changed based on the maximum minimum value of these measured variables, right? So this is called the auctioneering control strategy. So yeah, so in the next session we are going to first discuss this override control strategy, right, with examples mostly. And this mathematical standpoint we will not go into the detail, and similar is true for auctioneering control strategy, right? So here we will include in this discussion of this advanced control strategy, we will go for formalization, the mathematical formalization for cascade control theory as we did, and also for feed forward theories or feed forward control strategy.